Welcome into the Beat Sessions. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary. It's Friday, September 23rd. I hope you've all had an outstanding week. Let's talk about Editors and this new record, EBM. This is their seventh studio album and their follow-up to 2018's Violence. And EBM stands for Editors and Blank Mass. Benjamin John Power. It's nice to have him board officially as a member of the band. He helped out with the 2018 album Violence, consulted, so to speak, helped out with the music, but he's now officially a member of the band, even though he's still billed separately. I always think that's kind of awkward, but it's great to have this band back. A band that I really love their first two records, The Back Room and An End Has a Start, are incredible albums. And I remember the first time I heard this band, my roommate at the time was like, dude, you've never heard of Editors? You love Interpol. How can you not know who this band is? And loved them from the moment I hit play. It's it's funny too. I was going back prepping for this thing, and there was a critic that said, Editors reminds me of Interpol, if they sang about substance and not about fellatio and lengths of love, which I guess in all fairness is kind of true, but I still love Interpol. You all know that. And if Paul Banks wants to sing about fellatio all he wants, well, I will continue to listen. That is my prerogative, and I'd say just about every other Interpol fan loves that self-indulgence. That's what's great about them, but that's what's nice about having Editors. You know, when you're in that other headspace, that other mood, you have a band that lyrically, Tom Smith bringing something very different. I love his vocal element. It is slightly different than Paul Banks, obviously, so there's that added element to it. But what I love about their sound, no matter what, and it's constantly evolved, but there's always really just strong driving percussion, and I love the bass element there, that balance. These guys, from their first record to the start, no matter what has gone on, have always written very catchy, very big arena ready style of music, that just with a really driving tempo, and I dig that about these guys. They argue that music can be both pop and experimental, and I love that. You all know that I love both. I love pop music, I love avant-garde experimental music, and in listening to this new record, they capture both. It's incredible. This is something that is going to sound not completely different, obviously, with Blank Mass being on the record Violence and helping out there. But what I loved about going back and checking out some of the songs on that record is that you can see the push, that evolution and the start of turning in this electronically driven pop direction. Now, what I love about EBM is that versus Violence, which has kind of more of an electro pop feel to it, I'd argue, this record is heavy. This record is dark. It definitely sounds like more of that territory that they were navigating on their earlier records. And I love that. The electronic influence, super heavy, has more industrial textures than Violence as well. So I love that about this record as well. Enormous drums. They're really intense. That's a great aspect of this record. And it's just interesting to see the direction that this band has moved in after lead guitarist Chris Urbanowitz left the band about 10 years ago now. Their early sound, very guitar driven, very settled into alternative rock and post-punk versus, the new sound now. What I love about it is that you feel those influences. It's still there. This still sounds like an Editors record, but they're doing something completely different. And I think that that's what makes this band so exceptional. And I'd argue that they've gotten overlooked a lot since their beginnings. This is a band that I don't think gets credit where credit is necessarily due for the influence, the quality of their music, the nature of their experimentalism, and the way that they're always trying to grow and do something. This is a stellar project. I will say the vinyl package pisses me off. They did the one thing that you all know I hate when it comes to a double LP. It's a 53-minute runtime on this record. There's no D-side. It's artistic etching from EBM. And normally I'd have a lot of beef with this, and I kind of do still, but you get the A and B C-sides, each with 3 songs. They're going to have pretty decent runtimes because all these tracks are fairly long. And the price range is really, really the important thing when you start talking about these double LPs. Sometimes they can get rather expensive. I've looked on a number of different spots, and I've seen this price point right around $30. It's actually like $29.99 is pretty much the price point I've seen everywhere. So with that in mind, not passing the buck on that extra vinyl, I'm okay with it. That's the biggest thing. When you start charging people $40-50 for a double LP and you're not putting a D-side on that second record, that's what bums me out. But they've kept the price point reasonable on this thing. So that's something that's I'm going to vinyl please this thing. I'm just going to say it right now. But I love the energy of this record. I love the new direction that this band has worked in. And it really feels like they're starting to settle into that groove. After Chris left, it was tough. It was really tough going. And that's where this band sort of fell off for me. Those middle records just didn't hit me the way that The Back Room and An End Has a Start did. So it's cool to see that this band has really gotten back to to where they are, making the quality of music that they are fully capable of making. And the cool thing about this, aside from Chris leaving, there's been a lot of consistency in this outfit too. So for better or for worse, even some of those weaker records are still really they're still edited records. They're still really damn good, actually. But you can. I always appreciate the consistency of players being there. There's a dynamic that just grows over time. And when you choose to move in different directions and be more experimental, I would argue more often than not that those strong dynamics really help out and can play to the strengths of a band. Let's get into the track list on this thing. It opens up with Heart Attack, big drums, and fuzzy bass build in the intro. I love the way that the volume increases on this thing. It's kind of like waiting for the trip, so to speak. I'll just put it that way. But bigger electronic influence and violence in that last record, and then probably bigger than anything that you've ever heard from these guys. But I love the driving feel. Definitely more industrial textures than post-punk textures, but that's still there. Solid bounce in the bass riff on this song. I really dig the driving element there, and it's a great way to open this thing up. Picturesque is your second track. This thing comes in at 100 miles an hour, just hits the ground running. Verse back to the instrumental textures there. Once that intro ends, the verse starts. There's more of a mellow feel, more of the instrumental textures. Dark feeling balance with excellent hook. Really like this song a lot. Karma Climb is your third song. It's a perfect blend of the new electronic sound and that old school punk feel. Post-punk feel, that you get from the back room. And this is probably going to be my favorite song for that reason. This is an exceptional track. I love just the driving tempo, and I was writing notes on here. I said that this is a club sandwich of textures. There's just so many layers of the song. The synths really remind me of Depeche Mode. There's a big element on this album of that band, and I really dig this project for that reason. Heard a lot of Depeche Mode on this record. Kiss is your fourth song, more of that, and this is going to start the B-side, more of that industrial synth feel. This reminds me a lot of bands like Rufus Du Sol, Cut Copy. You get that rock and roll element in electronic music, and I love that about those bands performing electronic music live with guitars and drums and bass. Now I know that editors are working with a lot of synths these days, a lot of electronics, but it captures the feel and energy of those bands, and I enjoyed the song for that reason. Silence is your fifth song. Mellow, ambient. It's a melancholy in the opening. It's definitely a really solid, intimate moment on this album, and for an album that really has a lot of high energy, I like the way that this backed off halfway through. It comes at a perfect moment, but it doesn't take too long for the energy to hit on this thing, and it's just a great song. I do like the way that it builds and captures that momentum once it hits towards the end. Strawberry Lemonade, your sixth song, hits hard, and I love the way that, coming off and to close the B-side of this record, that this track takes on that characteristic. It's got this great industrial feel. I'm loving the catchy driving tempo of the song, more of that Depeche Mode feel on this track. Your C-side is going to kick off with Vibe, your seventh song. It's going to hit just as hard as Strawberry Lemonade, but you get a lighter feel. There's great vocal melodies in this song, brighter and moodier synths that are balanced with some of those darker elements. Super solid driving percussion. And honestly, Vibe there were moments where I was like, this kind of sounds like Coldplay. And Tom even kind of sounds like Chris Martin a little bit if he grew a pair of balls and started writing music the way that band used to, unfortunately. This is a band that they're a great example of, you want to bring up Coldplay, the way that they really moved into pop territory, abandoning pretty much all of their traditional sound. And I love the way that editors have made that same shift, but they've still kept grounded in their foundation, I would argue. I still feel like there's so much of the energy and the influence of those first records that is driving their sound still, that Coldplay, I love their first two records, but I just feel like they fell off so hard in a way with that pop sound this is one of the things that I really noticed at this point in this record, that despite the experimentalism of it, they do a very nice job of maintaining that balance, and I think that's important. I think you still, like, Coldplay records don't even sound like Coldplay records anymore. They should have just given the band a different name and gone in a different direction. The four of those guys could have just played together and gone under a different moniker, but that's really what that outfit feels like versus editors. Despite the difference, this is still the same band. Educate, your eighth song and penultimate track, more of that classic post-punk editors feel. I really like the way that comes full circle towards the end of this album. It really is a nice change of pace, and a welcome moment on this record. As much as I enjoyed the other stuff, it felt right as a penultimate track. Strange Intimacy is your final song. I love the vocal melody, intense electronic arrangement on this song. It's a great closer, and the piano element that's here is phenomenal as well. Really, really pleased with this record. It was fun checking this out last night, listening to it again this morning. We're going to give this thing a big old vinyl please, despite, pretty much violating just about every rule. These guys know how to do it right. And if you're not familiar with this band, check them out, because again, I don't think that credit is necessarily given where it's due with these guys more often than not. I wish they received more coverage in the media in general. Hope you find this review helpful. Hope you enjoyed this record also. Please like this video, share it, subscribe to the channel, do all the things to help me blow this project up in 2022, and stay tuned throughout the week for more album reviews. We'll see you next time on the Beat Sessions.